High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Better Sports Network.
No, it's not Thursday night. This is not a drill. We are going live on a Tuesday night here on the Better Sports Network. Not quite Fantasy Football Night in America, but damn it, we are going to make it work. Happy early Thanksgiving to all of you hanging out and watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Better Sports Network. I'm your host, Eric Balkman. You know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the High Stakes Fantasy Football or the Fantasy Football Players Championship. Follow me on the X at Eric Balkman. Go to myffpc.com, by the way, as a reminder, right now to play the FFPC Weekly Challenge. That's myffpc.com. There's no draft, no salary cap. Just choose the 10 players you want or the 12 players you want if you want to play with kickers and defenses. By Sunday's kickoff, get those in 1 p.m. on Sunday, and then just watch them ride throughout the weekend. Watch the points pile up. Remember, only one player per NFL team, which is really going to irritate our co-host that there is no stacking in this contest tonight. I'm going to bring him on in a second. $35 to enter or $200 to enter. Win up to $2,500. That's at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Shout out to our producer, Tyler Soto, tonight hanging out with us. And now it is time to bring in tonight's guest co-host. You know him from the GOAT District. You know him from the top of the leaderboards in the FFPC over several years. You follow him on the X at JD GOAT District, from the GOAT District, which is at GOAT District on X. John Daniel, a.k.a. JD. JD, what's going on, man? Thanks so much for hopping aboard tonight, man.
Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate you inviting me on. Always love chopping it up with you for sure, especially this time of the year, the crucial weeks, you know. I know I feel like Canadians are a good invite during American Thanksgiving week. You know what I mean? Because most people are traveling or they're getting their plans ready. You know, so it's a good week to have the good old Canadian. We get to try to steal a day off from work to watch some football up here north of the border. But I'm excited for tonight, man. There's a lot of fun stuff to talk about. NFL always keeps us on our toes.
So the thing is, I knew I needed to book a guest for this Tuesday night show, and I'm like, man, who would be a good guest co-host for Thanksgiving? I'm like, how about the pride of Canada, who has already celebrated Thanksgiving, right? You guys already celebrated Thanksgiving a few weeks back.
Already had
right?
the turkey. Oh,
yeah, you already had the turkey. So I'm like, I'll see if JD is available on Tuesday. And sure enough, you were, which is awesome to have you on. So how does that work in Canada when you have, especially you who are as engrossed in the National Football League as you are, how does that work on Thursday with 3 games? You get Black Friday. We're going to get the Jets and Dolphins on Black Friday. Are you just basically taking 2 days off this week to watch football?
Yeah, it's one of those where you balance every year. It's, you know, am I using a sick day? Am I using a vacation day? Or I work out of the house a lot of the time. So sometimes it's just on in the background and I have to work because it's crunch time. Like right now is usually crunch time. But, I take some time to watch my football. So
right, yes.
We'll work in between, you know,
there's
half times and stuff. We can throw in a couple calls.
And we get extended half times for I think all 3 games have extended half times again this year. We got Jack Harlow performing, I think in the Packers-Lions game. I can't remember who's performing in the Sunday night game. I think it's Steve Aoki is the halftime show of the Niners.
He just did he just did the F1 actually in Vegas.
Oh, there you go. So short trip for him to set up on Thursday night. So that'll be fun. It's going to be a fun show tonight. We're going to help you set for all your Week 12 questions. Week 12 prep is underway. We're also going to get into the what I'm calling the gotta habits. This is a huge week in the FFPC as everybody is trying to make that last playoff push, trying to make sure that they can squeak into their league playoffs, perhaps clinch a spot in the championship round of both the FFPC main event and the Fantasy Pros Championship. We're going to tell you what flexes you can trust and which ones you got to get out of your lineup. That's coming up at the bottom half of hour number 1. We're also going to talk about where JD stands on certain players. Isiah Pacheco, Dell, Tim Boyle, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. How does he feel about those quarterbacks leading offenses that feature Garrett Wilson, that feature Amari Cooper, Jerome Ford, and more? We're going to get into that. And then to close out the show tonight, some lineup advice, including, but not limited to, Jaylen Warren, Pat Freiermuth, Brian Robinson, Evan Engram, and much more. That will be our show this evening. JD, before we get into it, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to plug yourself again at the end of the show. You are a very busy man. during the football season, not only setting lineups, placing bids and everything, but you're also producing a lot of content. Can you tell your listener, or can you tell our viewers what you're doing over at the GOAT District again?
Yeah, for sure. Shout out to 1912, by the way. I see you in the chat there, buddy. Appreciate you. You can find us, the GOAT District. We are every Tuesday night, actually tonight at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. You'll find us on the Player Profiler Network, talking high stakes with my partner in crime, Dan Williamson, the overhyped sleeper. We co-own some high stakes teams together, or I should say we crush high stakes leagues together. We've been doing this show together for years now. We're on season 7 of the GOAT District. You can check out the GOAT District YouTube channel, and as well find us on your favorite podcast platform for all the audio goodness that we drop. But we basically focus, as you know, Balky, on high stakes dynasty fantasy or redraft, every type of fantasy you can think of. We try to bring in the best and break down as much as we can to help you guys win. That's what it's all about. I've said for years, and partially how the high stakes fantasy football hour got its start is I think high stakes fantasy football, and like really the FFPC, and you know this, JD. I mean, like it's expanded to, you could play in the FFPC for as little as $5 right now. So it's not really high stakes anymore. It's more season, just your home season long fantasy football. Very true.
And I think that the players have been underrepresented as far as analysts and analysis over the years so much. What you guys do so great is not only do you have a lot of great industry players come on, especially from the FFPC pros versus Joes. You had a ton of those guys. But you and Dan, you are high stakes players, which makes it so great because you're getting the unique angle of somebody who's not just looking for clicks, or somebody who's just, trying to get his name out there, his or her name out there. This is what you guys are doing, trying to win $1 million in the FFPC main event, the FFPC Fantasy Pros Championship. Like, you're putting up real money and you're offering your expertise. This is something that I think is so underrepresented in the industry, and you guys are churning out some great content out there. And I would tell you to keep it up, but I don't have to, because I know that you will. So let's get into the analysis portion of the program tonight. Kenneth Walker, the third, is in the news. Pete Carroll, the head coach of the Seahawks, said that Walker is not considered as a candidate for IR right now. They're still trying to figure out what's going on with his injury. It's officially listed as an oblique. He is probably going to miss this weekend. Thursday night game, obviously a short week for Seattle to take on the San Francisco 49ers, which I think opens up the door for Zach Charbonnet. In Week 11, Charbonnet saw 85% of the team's offensive snaps when they lost to the Rams. And this is a massive, like, if you have him on your roster, JD, I think it feels a little weird, especially if you're trying to make the playoffs in a high stakes league. Like, am I really going to flex out Charbonnet? Yes, you do need to flex out Charbonnet. This is the type of guy that, maybe won't put up a massive, 180, 193 touchdown, 190, yard, 3 touchdown week. I don't think we're going to see that. But the fact of the matter is, we could see Zach Charbonnet put up good, solid numbers against the Niners defense that, he should be able to be all right at. And if you're just looking for somebody to get 10 or 15 points for you from your second flex, Charbonnet is a must start this week.
Yeah, these are the guys, Balky, that you want on your roster, especially when you're drafting these high stakes tournaments. Like he was going, him, Achane, Mostert, Laporta are the 4 guys in the 10th round that you wanted. I'm looking at a main event draft that we did, the boys, and actually overhyped goats. Yeah, so this is Dan and I. We did this live one in Vegas, and these guys went in the 10th round. So these are the type of high upside guys that you want, and this is exactly the reason you hope you held on to him on your bench. And now you get to play him, and he's got that workhorse ability. He's catching the ball, he's doing everything. Now he has the opportunity, which is always what you want from your running backs. And if you look at Seattle as a team, so 25th in rush yards per game, 17th in yards rush per attempt, and then 6th in passing play percentages, just under 61%, 31st in average time of possession. So you got to think that, maybe a refresh starter at the running back position is going to give a spark to this run game. The only problem I see with this, Balky, is the next 3 weeks, you see San Francisco, Dallas, and then San Francisco. not the best schedule when you need some big weeks from your horses.
I'm going to throw another monkey wrench into this, and something that I think is also concerning, at least to me, and we'll get your thoughts on it. But that's the quarterback position for Seattle this week. So Geno Smith said, and according to Brady Henderson, just tweeted this out literally 20 minutes ago. Geno Smith said that he's feeling better, but he is still experiencing discomfort with the triceps contusion that he got diagnosed with. Now, Pete Carroll said he wasn't going to practice until Wednesday regardless. Smith said that Pete Carroll will ultimately make the choice whether it's going to be Geno Smith or Drew Lock out there. This was an injury that he suffered against the Rams this past week. I got to wonder, like I said, I'm still rolling out Zach Charbonnet. I just think the opportunity is so much and so great and could be awesome for Charbonnet. But, you think about Drew Lock quarterbacking this team. What does that do for Tyler Lockett? What does that do for Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I think was sort of a fringe second flex for a lot of FFPC players? If it's Lock out there, what are you doing? What are you doing different with the Seattle receivers? And does that change your mindset at all with Zach Charbonnet this week?
Just ask the Jets fans how they feel when Zach Wilson goes out. You know what I mean? Like, that's Drew Lock for me. I kind of get that same flat, boring, paint drying kind of feel, tingle inside of me when I think of Drew Lock starting. I mean, let's face it, the thing with Geno is, like, 2022 was great, but I mean, he's over 33 years old now. He's 22nd right now, fantasy points per game, 9th in the NFL in interceptable passes. So, I mean, not giving you the best performance. And then you've got this amazing trio when you look at the receivers in Seattle, and that's probably why they're passing the ball so much. Mm-hmm. You've got the rookie, in JSN, and then you've got Lockett and DK. So, I mean, Drew Lock coming in does not get you excited, especially for the passing game. So I do see a possibility of them leaning on the run game, which would help Charbonnet, you got to think. And then I always say, like, when these backups come in, younger quarterbacks, they're gonna gravitate to the short passing game when they do pass it. And Charbonnet does catch the ball. So that's where in the PPR game you can probably get at least a nice floor from Charbonnet, and then you hope he, either gets in the end zone or runs for a big one.
Smith-Njigba is going to be on my bench this week if Lockett's the true coin flip, right?
Yeah, he seems to be every week like a questionable. Because I've got him on some rosters, and I have him and DK even on one roster. But they're guys, it's hard to sit them because they're giving you the 17 to 21 points that are so valuable in the FFPC. Dan and I talk about this often. You want 20 points as often as you can get it, right? From your starters in the FFPC. 10 points is a fill-in. It's kind of fill in the blank. 15 is okay, depending on how the rest of your team does. But the guys that can get you the 20s, those are nice. And those DK and Lockett are definitely guys that can do that in the right circumstance. Again, you're playing Dallas and San Fran. I think Dallas is the best against the passing game right now. So not ideal there for whoever's at quarterback. Again, maybe they lean on Charbonnet.
JD, let's do this. Well, number one, shout out to Tyler Soto. So it is, he just looked at the halftime shows on Thanksgiving. Jack Harlow for the Packers and Lions, Steve Aoki for the Niners and Seahawks nightcap. The middle game between the Commanders and the Cowboys, Dolly Parton is going to be doing the halftime. Fresh off of singing Rocky Top at the Tennessee Volunteers game this past week. She's going to be performing halftime of that Cowboys Commanders game. Let's go to YouTube, the YouTube chat right now. Bronson Howe, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right. He has the opportunity right now to trade Courtland Sutton and Jordan Addison, and he can upgrade at receiver. He can get Chris Olave, he can get Michael Pittman, he can get Mike Evans. Number one, JD, would you give up Sutton and Addison for any one of those players? And if you had your druthers, which one of those receivers is your best bet for the best possible fantasy production for the remainder of the 2023 season?
You said it was Pittman. Who are the three receivers?
It's going to be Chris Olave, Michael Pittman, and the other one was Mike Evans.
So what I do like is selling high on Addison and Sutton, just because Sutton's had these last, end of game type. Like, he's been decent. Let's face it, considering he's in a Denver offense. but he's had a few lucky kind of end of the game breaks. And then you have Addison. I mean, we'll talk about JJ later, but if JJ does come back, you got to think Addison maybe takes a step back with regards to where he fits in the hierarchy of the targets. So I think it's a good kind of sell high with those two. And then you are getting yourself maybe a more sure thing. Pittman, I think he's receiver like 15 right now. So he's giving you pretty consistent production every week. He's the number one target in that offense. And that offense has been decent with Minshew. Minshew slings the ball. So if you want to maybe get yourself some more, this is redraft, you said, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So if you want to get maybe some more consistent production, a guy that you can just slot in, forget it. I'm more of a top heavy when it comes to receiver because I don't like making decisions as to who you're going to play. So I prefer upgrading. So if you can get one of those guys, I mean, Evans and Pittman, I like, they're proven. Maybe Olave's got the upside. He's given us a good week recently, but I don't know. Carr kind of makes me nervous in New Orleans. I think those three guys are all fairly similar rest of the season. I'd have to look at the breakdown of their schedule. That's probably what I'd look at if it's redraft for sure.
Well, Slurp Show pointing this out on YouTube. Michael Thomas got placed on IR by the Saints today, so the earliest he can come back is week 16. Does that make Olave more attractive? Does that give him the tiebreaker here?
Forgot about MT out. Yeah, I mean, we're going to talk about some other receivers in New Orleans, but Olave without MT, again, you got to think that this rookie is just going to keep progressing and ascending in this offense with Carr. I mean, I talk about often the rapport between quarterback and receiver. You got to give it time sometimes. Mm-hmm. Carr just got here, right? So as the season goes, we're seeing that rapport get better. And yeah, you know what? That is definitely tiebreaker with MT out. He's I think 4 weeks, they said at least he's out.
Yep. Yeah, and quite frankly, I mean, it could be the rest of the season. This is a guy that is no stranger to the training room. Quite frankly, I was surprised what we got from him early in the season. And by the time he's ready to come back, there's a real possibility that the Saints might be playing for 2024. They might still be in the chase for the wild card, and certainly it would help to get Michael Thomas back. But I think with a guy his age and with his injury issues, I think, red flags have to be going off for you if you have Michael Thomas right now, because you may have seen the last of him for 2024.
Was Carr signed 2 years with, who did he sign with?
That is a good question. I think it's longer than that. I'm gonna look it up right now.
I was just wondering how motivated he is to finish off strong. You know what I mean? Because he hasn't had the best start necessarily.
He will be, JD, he is under contract through next year and the year after. There is a potential out after 2025, but technically he will not reach free agency until 2027. I got to believe the Saints would seriously look at getting rid of him after 2025, but he'll be motivated to perform this year, next year, and the year after that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Nice.
Cooper Kupp, my God, the roller coaster that is Cooper Kupp this year. One of my local fantasy football shows I do here in Wisconsin, we had to pick a bust of the year at the start of the year, and one of my co-hosts chose Cooper Kupp for his bust of the year, and that went from looking like an awesome pick, then to a terrible pick, then to a pretty good pick, and now I don't know what to think. Like it's been all over the place. Adam Schefter reported yesterday that Cooper Kupp is day to day with a low ankle sprain. Kupp has had a lot of problems with this ankle, and obviously because of that, and because they have Puka Nacua, they can kind of afford to treat Cooper Kupp with kid gloves here. Now, if he does, I would imagine he'll play this week, but God only knows what's going to happen. When the Rams release their injury report, which I think comes out tomorrow, we'll find out where Kupp is at. I would imagine he would be questionable at this point. Do you have any concerns knowing that this is a dude who is not young anymore? It's a guy who has had a lot of problems with this ankle. And there's a lot of people that, I can't remember who said it. I think it was on the First and 15 show with Abib Agbatoba, and one of them said, like, do we know that Puka Nacua is not going to be like the number one guy going forward, given his great start and where he's at in his career versus Cooper Kupp? So I think that's something to consider too. When you look at Cooper Kupp this week, if he's active, is it just a slam dunk start for you, JD? Like you don't think about it, or is there again? as we're trying to make the playoffs, we're trying to move on into the championship round. Is there a little bit more nuance to starting Cooper Kupp this week?
Yeah, I think there's a fine line, right? You got to kind of toe the line with regards to not getting too fancy, not outsmarting yourself. That's one thing you don't want to do, is start outsmarting yourself. I'm a big play your studs guys, unless I really, really have evidence that, whatever the case is, whether it's injury or, where you really have big decisions to make. But I'll usually lean towards my studs. I feel like Kupp in most cases, because of where he's going, it really depends for me on who else I have on my roster. So I have that team with Lockett, Metcalf. I've got Ridley on that team. I've got Kupp. So I have guys. I've got Kittle and Kelsey, and it's FFPC. So I can fill my receiver spots and my flexes, and I don't necessarily have to depend on Kupp if it's not a sure thing and he's looking like he's back completely healthy. Puka Nacua has definitely, even with Kupp there, he's been awesome. So to me, he's kind of taking over. Like you said, Kupp's been out a lot the last few years. He's getting up there, and Puka's just looked really good. And let's not forget Atwell, man. Tutu Atwell, 14 targets his last 2 games. For me, Atwell's a nice, sneaky pickup. I've picked him up wherever I've seen him on waiver wires, FFPC. You can slide him in and hope for, especially if Kupp doesn't play, he's the type of guy you want in your flex for that possible upside. I
think, let's do this, because there's a lot to be said about the Rams and Nacua and Kupp. We will know more when the injury report comes out. We'll know more as we get closer to the start of week 12. Now, in probably the worst possible timing ever as far as Justin Jefferson's career goes, this is a guy that potentially could have came back last week, and yet his team was on Sunday Night Football. So a lot of Justin Jefferson owners aired to the side of caution. They didn't play him, and Jefferson didn't play. And you think, okay, it's going to get better in week 12. As Lee Corso would say, not so fast, my friend. Monday night game, the Bears visit the Vikings, and we don't know again if Jefferson's going to play. Kevin O'Connell has already said that Jefferson, as of right now, is questionable for that Monday Night Football against the Bears. Jefferson had missed the 4 games that he had to when he was on IR, and he's missed 2 more since then. O'Connell used the phrase, "We do have to be smart," when he was talking about this yesterday. The Vikings are on bye in week 13 as well. So this is we're reading between the lines here, JD. It almost seems like the Vikings, who are trying to make the playoffs right now, might be wise to wait till week 14, but maybe then it'll be too late and they would have missed their window. What do you do with Jefferson if he is a true game time decision, if he truly is questionable for a Monday night game? I mean, you got to scramble to try to get Darnell Mooney or, KJ Osborne or somebody like that on your team, if they're even available, which they may not be. How do you play Justin Jefferson this week, man?
Yeah, or you hope you have Addison or TJ Hawk, right? And you can kind of play your lineup in a way that you can swap them out. But those are tough. Those Monday night, like you said, they have the bye coming up. I mean, maybe you wait to see if you are ahead. Your chances increase after this win to bring back JJ. I mean, as fantasy owners, we're all sitting here. I know I've got JJ on some rosters, just salivating to get him back. And that if he is coming back, I mean, this guy was going number 1 overall in the offseason in drafts. So you're not going to leave him on your bench, even if he's in your flex spot. You're pretty excited to have JJ back. As the Vikings, if I'm the Vikings, I'm probably waiting. I'm probably waiting till after the bye. He's, you don't want to see these guys long term. We saw Achane last week, maybe came back a little too early, and then tweaked something really early in the game. It would suck if that happens, but I don't think you can sit JJ if he is supposed to be starting. The tough part is that Monday night versus. So it's really roster dependent. If you have the players to be able to manage it and swap them out. And like you said, there are options out there on waiver wire, but if you really need the wins, really need some points, you probably have someone on your bench that you can depend on more. But if you need upside and maybe you're behind, you're going up against one of the better teams in the league, I'm for sure playing JJ for the upside.
I think that's an important assertion to make, because if you are, let's say you're chasing that 4th seed in the main event for the FFPC or the Fantasy Pros Championship, and you need points like that, then I think you wait and you see what you can get with Justin Jefferson. Because if your replacement is, some middling, top 35, top 40 receiver, or top 25 or top 30 running back, that's probably not going to get it done. Justin Jefferson could get it done. Now, conversely, if you're playing a little bit of defense and you already have one of those spots locked up, then you probably you want to err on the side of caution and sit Jefferson and put somebody else in there, because you don't need to be rolling dice at that point. What you need to be doing is locking up spots. I think, and normally I say you think long, you think wrong, paralysis by analysis, right? Yeah. But I think if you sit and just look at your team and you assess, the rest of your teams in your league that are in playoff contention, I think the answer is going to come to you as far as what you should be doing with Justin Jefferson. And bear in mind, we're recording the show on Tuesday. Normally we do the show on Thursdays. We're doing this show live on the Tuesday night. There's going to be an injury report tomorrow. There's going to be an injury report on, not for the Vikings. There's going to be an injury report on Thursday for Thanksgiving, Friday, and Saturday. So you should get some more pieces of information with this Justin Jefferson thing. In Jefferson's division, the NFC North, there's going to be a pair of those teams in action on Thanksgiving, and they're playing each other. It's the Green Bay Packers and the Detroit Lions. Now, the Packers are coming off a big victory against the Los Angeles Chargers at Lambeau Field. Probably the Packers' best offensive performance of the year. Jordan Love broke a 31-game, 300-yard passing game less streak for the Packers that dated back to 2021. This is like Aaron Rodgers didn't even throw a 300-yard passing game last year. Love finally did it against the Chargers. No surprise there. Chargers defense is no bueno. Christian Watson was listed as limited both in yesterday's practice and today's practice. Those were both estimations since the Packers were not practicing. I look at Christian Watson as a player that can put it all together, JD. Like we saw what he did at the second half of last year. That wasn't a fluke to me. Like you can't just pile up all those great games and say, oh, this guy's a bust, he can't do it. He's done it. Like we know he can do it. Luke Musgrave, we just found this out from Matt LaFleur, just got out of the hospital for some sort of procedure. It sounds like he's not only going to miss this week, but it could be future weeks as well, which is going to open up some targets here. Is this the time that the Packers finally are like, you know what? We're going to do what we did with Watson last year before that Bills game. We're going to make him a huge part of our game plan. We're going to scheme him up. We're going to start doing these jet sweeps, end arounds. We're going to get him involved in the passing game, because we don't have the luxury of Luke Musgrave, and we need to get a win against a pretty high-powered Detroit offense that the Packers might have to go tit for tat with. Christian Watson this week, and I'm trying to sell him. Like, if it's not obvious, I'm trying to sell him right now. Does he sneak in to an FFPC flex spot for you in the main event or the Fantasy Pros Championship?
Again, because of where you drafted in Balky, I'm thinking about some teams where I've got Watson. See, the danger with Watson is we saw what we did last year, which was amazing. Red zone monster, just, at the catch, just grabbing everything that came his way. It was amazing, right? For anyone who owned Watson. The problem is Rodgers wasn't coming back. And when you have a new quarterback coming in, a younger quarterback, you don't really know where his tendencies are going to go, who he's going to gravitate to, who's going to become. Doesn't necessarily mean it transfers over and Watson stays the number one target. Problem is Watson came into the season injured, loves building rapport with the younger guys. Now, to me, Jaden Reed is the guy that I want. Jaden Reed right now, 14.5 yard per catch over Dubs, 10.4. Dubs is more TD dependent. Watson just hasn't necessarily been getting the volume, especially in the red zone. I think he's got like 3 or 4 targets on the season in the red zone, whereas last year he was getting smashed in the red zone almost every game. So for me, Reed is the guy that I want right now in this offense. I love that Jordan Love, excuse the pun, is turning around. I mean, as fantasy owners, we're impatient and some of these guys take longer, but I know Dan and I were pretty high on Love. We have him on a lot of teams as our QB2. So it's nice to see him, maybe hopefully he gets on a little roll here and this offense gets on a roll. But Watson for me is probably, like you said, in a flex position right now at best. I'm not ready to kind of give him one of those receiver slots yet.
He did score a touchdown last week, but 2 catches for just 24 yards. He has had 37 yards or less in every single game but one this season and has still failed to catch 4 passes in a single game this year. You play Dynasty, obviously, JD. Who would you rather have in a vacuum, Christian Watson or Jaden Reed right now for Dynasty?
Jaden Reed.
And you didn't even have to think about it too much,
No. Again, because I have to go by what I see with Jordan Love at the position. I can't, like, as much as I love what I saw from Watson last year, Jordan Love is a quarterback moving forward. So if that's who he's going to gravitate to and keep building rapport with, I like Reed right now and what I see from him.
And the Packers, I mean, like, I never really would have thought this at the start of the season, but their 2 best receivers are their number 3 and 4 guys right now in Reed and Dontavian Wicks, which is bizarre because those guys are still getting massively outsnapped by Watson and Dobbs. I think we're seeing a little bit of the athletic limitations of Romeo Dobbs. I think this is a guy that can be trustworthy on 3rd down. He can go up and make the tough grab. And like you said, a little bit touchdown dependent because he has been pretty successful in the red zone this year. I don't know if he gets better than that. He might. He's a very young player. He's only in his 2nd year. Yeah. We'll see what happens there.
True.
But this is just, again, with our eyes, this is what we're seeing right now. A.J. Dillon was listed as limited on the practice report for Monday. I believe he was limited again today with a groin issue, and that's the last thing Green Bay needs right now. Aaron Jones was diagnosed with a sprained MCL. Matt LaFleur saying he is highly unlikely to go on Thanksgiving, and he might miss multiple weeks there. Manuel Wilson had I want to say, I know it was a shoulder injury. I don't know if it was a dislocation or not, but it sounds like he's probably not going to be ready to go. The Packers poached their former running back Patrick Taylor off the New England practice squad to their active roster. They do have they just re-signed James Robinson to the practice squad again, so they're trying to build up the depth right now. I know this is weird because Dillon, he has not succeeded as the way we thought A.J. Dillon would succeed this year as a guy between the tackles. Ironically, he's been catching more passes this year. This past week, 14 carries for 29 yards, but he caught 4 passes for 32 yards. Now against Detroit, a game that the Packers could get down early and might be forced to abandon the control the game with our running game and have our defense make plays, grind it out, keep it close to the end. The Packers may not have the luxury of doing that. And A.J. Dillon, when I would say, okay, this is not a Dillon game at all, but the fact that he's catching passes, JD, I think he's an interesting flex this week.
Yeah, 21 targets, 16 receptions. But I think that's probably just LaFleur realizing this guy's yard per carry has gone down from 5.3 in 2020 down to 3.5 this year after 10 games. So you got to think, you know what? We've got him. We've got Jones. Jones gets hurt every once in a while. Let's make AJD a bit more versatile. And I mean, he seemed to always been able to catch the ball, not necessarily because Jones was more involved, obviously. But I think they're just using A.J. Dillon kind of where his career is going, probably more towards catching the ball. I just don't like him overall. The funny thing is, you look at RotoViz game splits, he's actually produced way more with Aaron Jones in the lineup than when Aaron Jones is out. And we have this assumption, like you said, that, Jones is hurt, A.J. Dillon's going to be the guy. He's going to get a ton of volume. We haven't necessarily gotten that outcome so far in the last 2 years when you look at that game split. So for me, I'm not excited about it. If I'm desperate, I need him to fill in a flex spot. I mean, I'll do it if I'm injured, obviously at RB. But I'm not confident at all if I need to depend on A.J. Dillon this week.
There are players like that where we just assume once the starting guy goes down that all of a sudden the efficiency is going to go up just because the volume does. That's not always Tony Pollard's the poster child for that this year, right? Like he should be crushing it this year based on volume and opportunity, and he's not. And there were people that warned us about this last year with Pollard, that just because he's the guy, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be the 101 or a top 3 running back this year. There are players like that, and we're seeing it with A.J. Dillon a little bit as well. Speaking of injuries, I hear this every year, JD, and I want you to weigh in on this. I hear people complain about injuries, usually in September and October, more so like when there's more people in the thick of, playing for a playoff spot or whatever. And I hear people say all the time, oh my goodness, the injuries this year, it's the worst I've ever seen it. It's the worst I can imagine. It's the worst I can remember in fantasy football as long as I've been playing. And every year I'm just kind of like, yeah, I think we're kind of prisoners of the moment. I think injuries are bad every year. Like they hit us differently. They always hit us hard. But I think sometimes we forget about how bad the injuries were in 2022 or 2021 when we look just what's fresh in our mind in 2023. In your opinion, have injuries for fantasy football been significantly worse this year than in years past? I guess I don't see it.
I think it depends who you ask, right? Like if my team is, getting pummeled right now and I'm 2-9, I'm probably thinking, wow, this is the worst year ever in injuries. Right. But, if my team's 9-2 and let's say the only injury I have is like J.K. Dobbins or something, and I've been able to pick up Mostert or, replace him somehow, then you're thinking, yeah, it's, it hasn't been that bad. I think every year it fluctuates, but it probably evens out. I would think.
Yeah.
Because the other thing is, are you basing it on quantity or on significance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there might be more injuries overall in the NFL, but how many of those actually affect our fantasy teams? And that's probably what we're gauging it by. But I would imagine based on the game, same amount of players, the game has changed, but at the end of the day, I would imagine more games now actually. So yeah, you know what? Now that I think about it, with more games, I would like to see, I don't have stats on that, but I would imagine that there are probably more injuries. I just think, again, the significance is probably about the same year to year.
I think that's a good point, and it's something to keep in mind. It's a sliding scale. When we have more games, there's obviously going to be more injuries as well. And then how do you quantify it? Is it a quantity thing? Is it a quality thing? Like you said, I mean, there are a zillion different ways to answer that. We have just scraped the surface on answering a zillion different questions tonight here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. We'll step out and take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the gotta have it production guys in Week 12. Should you be rolling with guys like Jahan Dotson, James Conner, Roshan Johnson? We're going to talk about those players and much more. He's JD from the GOAT District. You follow him on the X machine at JD GOAT District. Remember to stick around. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. We're talking about much more, including Dom Gazzetti's Fantasy Pros Championship starter sit question. We'll get to that as well. JD and Eric Balkman here on BSN.
The Bears have to be one of the most inept franchises of any sport I've ever seen in my entire life. And they share the city with the White Sox, who are also inept. Like, that is how bad the Bears are. I just don't understand how you can go your entire existence and the quarterback that wins you a Super Bowl is Jim McMahon. You couldn't find anybody else.
They don't have a good history with quarterbacks, but they let him be the quarterback for a long time, too.
Deshaun Watson and Patrick Mahomes right there. Mm-hmm. And you drafted Mitch Trubisky. They were right there. I there's a lot of pain in being a Falcons fan. The Bears are one of the teams I could argue they might have it worse, and they have a Super Bowl.
And
when the best quarterback in the past 50 years is Jay Cutler, you have a problem.
That's so funny that you just said that. We were talking about Jay Cutler the other day, me and my friend, and I was like, yeah, he was on, because we were watching the Colorado Rockies game against the Giants, and it looked like he was behind the thing. I was, yeah, well, he played for Denver most of his career. We looked it up. Chicago let him be their starting quarterback way too long.
Here's the thing, too, is that Jay Cutler wasn't bad. Like, he was erratic. He wasn't terrible, though.
The poor man's Brett Favre.
I'm taking him over Justin Fields. I'm sorry.
I would.
But Jay Cutler led that team to an NFC title game that they lost to Green Bay. But he's gotten farther than anybody else. You want to know who the other starting quarterback was for the Bears in the other Super Bowl appearance they made? It was Rex Grossman. What are we doing out here? It was Rex Grossman, and Kyle Orton was the backup. How are you that bad? Bro, like, oh my God. Listen to the top 5. According to Football Reference, the top 5 greatest Bears quarterbacks of all time. Jay Cutler, number 1.
I can't believe it.
Sid Luckman, who last played in 1950, is number 2. Jim Harbaugh is number 3. Jim McMahon, the Super Bowl winner, is number 4, and he played there for 6 years. And Mitch Trubisky, is number 5 on the list as terms of passing yards go.
Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on the Better Sports Network. And what would the Better Sports Network Bettercast be without a special treat for you on Thanksgiving? We are gamifying Thursday Night Football this Thursday night. Not on, well, it's going to be on the Bettercast app, but it will be the Bendercast. Yeah, that's right. Howard Bender, Fantasy Alarm's own, takes over the Bettercast between the Niners and the Seattle Seahawks Thursday night. You remember you can check out Moose and Keith's game preview of that, including some of their top picks and plays. Compete in our free contest, answering pregame questions, which will be live in the Bettercast app. And then Thursday night during the game, you can predict what's going to happen, as well as testing your NFL knowledge at the same time. Chat with all the Bettercast people in there, all the fans, the big plays, the top performers, and the bus. There is no purchase necessary. There's no subscription necessary. It's always free to play. Watch Thursday Night Football with us this Thanksgiving. Play our free contest, win tickets. The more questions you answer, the more tickets you win. And the more tickets you get, the better and more authentic NFL signed gear and collectibles you can get. Download the free Bettercast app in the App Store and Google Play. Must be at least 18 years of age. That is Thursday night, the Howard Bendercast on the Better Sports Network on the Bettercast app. I am with John Daniel, JD Goat District on the X. Of course, you listen to him on the Goat District. You watch him on the Goat District. Which will be coming up later tonight. Who's the guest tonight? It's you, Dan Williamson, and who else?
Just the two of us.
Just the two of you. Okay.
Yeah, we go hard. We only have 60 minutes. We do bring in guests. We actually have to get you on the show sometime soon. But
I'm in.
We do guests often, but during the season, especially those 60 minutes, we try to just hammer through as much as we can to help the audience out. But tonight is the two of us looking at the quarterback apocalypse going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is more of like a non-fantasy question. Scoring's down this year. And nobody talks about it. I think it's because there's so much too high safety being played around the NFL that it's really limited big plays, and I think that's the reason scoring's down. But I think another reason, too, is not necessarily all the quarterback injuries, but just I've always said, I mean, for decades, there are not 32 people that walk the planet that can play the quarterback position. And now we're seeing even more of a dearth of it. Are you concerned about that for fantasy football long term? Because I think that it levels the playing field a little bit, right? If you're having more mediocre quarterback play, that just means you're going to get more mediocre offensive play too.
Yeah, and that's why when you see like Will Levis coming off the bench and going for 4 touchdowns, you get excited as a fantasy player because you want to see more quarterbacks with higher talent level in the NFL. When you've got, I hate to go back to Zach Wilson, but when you've got Zach Wilson starting for the New York Jets on a team like that, that the NFL is hungry for talent at the quarterback position, and you hope every year that you're going to get more guys. It seems like we're getting usually, 3 guys, 4 possible, usually 2 or 3 will hit. We would need like a serious run, where you'd get like a bunch of guys, and then you need like the odd undrafted guy to come in. The nice thing now is a guy like Josh Dobbs. I know he's played on every team, and we're going to get to him in a bit, but he's kind of offering something nice. He's running the ball. He's like QB 15 right now this year. Now he's in a team that has the weapons. I mean, he keeps ascending in that offense. You might see him as the future quarterback in Minnesota, barring what happens to Cousins. But it definitely worries me, especially with the talent you have. Tight end now is getting some really nice young talent. You got Laporta, Green Bay. You've got youth and Mayers in Vegas. So you see the talent at the other position. So it'd be nice to get the quarterback talent kind of back up, but deep at the depth. So that those bottom teams can, but then you have like Deshaun Watson, who's supposed to be one of those stud QBs. And now like who knows what his future is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, all great point. I think one of my big fantasy regrets in 2023, when I look back on it, is not, I have Josh Dobbs nowhere. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in that boat, but I really wish I would have gone on him to grab Dobbs in at least one league, so I had Cousins in so many leagues. And I never went with Dobbs anywhere in
I had so much Richardson and Cousins, so I had to find quarterbacks out there, and that's how I end up with guys like Howell and Dobbs, and Mayfield. Like you make it work, man.
Yeah, and I'll say that too. Like last year, I had a lot of Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford, 2 guys that got hurt early, and it forces you to sniff out these.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I got Geno Smith carried me in a ton of leagues last year.
Yeah, me too.
And who was the other? Wasn't there another like middling quarterback that was out there early in the season, JD? Or maybe I'm misremembering it. But I know who it was. It was Jared Goff. Goff is.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Because he was new in Detroit, right? We didn't know what to expect. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So I mean, Goff. But I mean, that's what happens. Like you get players hurt, man. You got to get out there and get those players. Otherwise, you will starve and you will be out of it earlier than you think. Okay,
Dobbs could legit be like a league winner if, like, let's say JJ comes back and they go on a run the next few weeks and he really starts putting up points. He could be a difference maker, and you know, hopefully you guys got him if you were needing at quarterback.
And I think, you know, this is I was so huge, and I was kind of half right about this. I can't remember if I talked to you about this or not, but I was drafting so many Vikings and Lions this year, not necessarily because I was a huge believer in the talent, but I was a huge believer, and I didn't think either one of these defenses were going to put it together this year. And I know the Vikings brought in Brian Flores, but, you know, you can have the world's greatest chef. If he's cooking with rotten tomatoes and stale bread, it can only be so good. And look at what the Vikings did this year. You know, and I had Cousins so many teams, and then Dobbs comes in, and he's got this cavalcade of weapons to work with Hopkinson and Jefferson and Addison, and you know, and so that was part of the reason I was so in on the Vikings. Lions, I was kind of wrong on, even though, you know, St. Brown and Laporte has been unbelievable, obviously, this year, and Gibbs and Montgomery and Goff. I'm really, really surprised, and I feel like I go out of my way every single show I do to praise Dan Campbell, because I ripped him so much after I saw Hard Knocks. I did not think that this guy was going to make it. Not only is he making it, he's flourishing. Probably a legit, he's definitely a legit candidate for Coach of the Year. He might be the choice right now. I give all the praise in the world to him and Aaron Glenn running that defense, because they have wowed me this year, what they've been able to do. Let's get into Dom Gazzetti's question here. He's got a question for his flex. He's in his Fantasy Pros Championship this week, trying to get to the playoffs or maybe improve his seed. I don't know. Dom Gazzetti's a really good player, so I would imagine he's just trying to improve his seed. Jordan Addison, who's taking on the Bears on Monday Night Football. Again, the unknown with Justin Jefferson is there. And he also has DeAndre Hopkins this week going up against the hapless Carolina Panthers. That game is at where is that game this week? That's at Tennessee. So Hopkins is at home against the Panthers.
Yes, against Carolina.
And
Addison playing Chicago.
Yeah, which one would you roll with there, JD?
Hopkins, I think both of these guys have been pretty hot. I just don't know about that Tennessee-Carolina game. I'd probably lean Minnesota with Dobbs throwing him the ball. I don't know that JJ's back they're off this week, right?
The Vikings play this week.
They're off next week. Sorry, yeah, what am I saying? Because we were talking about JJ's bye week, so now I'm confused.
But that's the thing. Knowing that they're off next week, I mean, that could affect the judgment of what the Vikings do with Jefferson this week.
I just like the momentum of the Minnesota offense right now, and I think that they, I lean Addison in this. I'd have to look. I'm hesitant because I want to see the passing defense on each of these guys. That's probably what I'd go look at. But I would imagine Carolina probably better passing defense than Chicago.
And I mean, I would imagine just numbers wise, it has to be better, because when have you had to pass to beat the Panthers this year? Like, it just, you don't usually have to do that.
Especially when you have Derrick Henry, right?
Right. And we're going to get into, I think we have, do I have Derrick Henry on the rundown? Maybe I don't.
Later on, you've got him as a decision.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about Derrick Henry then for sure. What about this one? The Harry Snowman on the YouTube chat right now. Same question, sort of. DeAndre Hopkins against the Panthers. It's him or Zay Flowers going up against the Los Angeles Chargers, again at home. But the Chargers gave up all that passing yardage to Jordan Love and the Packers pass catchers this week. Flowers, I want to say, I could be wrong on this. I want to say 5 for 72 in his last game after a couple of clunkers. So it seems like he's coming on. Is that enough for you to play Flowers over Hopkins?
No, I'm probably playing Addison or Hopkins ahead of Flowers. I don't know that they're necessarily going to have to, put up start flinging the ball around with regards to them at the Chargers. Chargers have been pretty much duds with Buddy. What's his face? The coach.
Brandon Staley.
That's it, Staley. That defense hasn't been great at all. But I don't feel like they're necessarily going to be throwing the ball as much as Minnesota will be against a divisional rival with regards to Minnesota-Chicago game.
I'd have to look it up, but you look at one of the rips on the Packers defense this year, which is very similar to the Chargers defense. They give you that too high safety look, which again prevents a lot of big plays. But man, you can get chunk yardage rushing the football. And if there's one thing the Ravens are good at, it's rushing the football with Lamar Jackson, Gus Edwards, and Keaton Mitchell. So I think there's a lot to be said about Baltimore doing a lot of destruction on the ground without having to go through the air with Zay Flowers.
And you know what? Now that I'm just thinking about on the defensive side, Chicago's been sneaky defensively the last few games. Like they've been, I think they were going into the last game, they were like a top 5 defense the last few weeks. And then we saw what they did against Detroit. So they might actually, I might actually lean Hopkins in that decision, just going back to the Addison Hopkins situation. Chicago's been sneaky. You know what? They're so tough. Like these guys are all in the same range for me. That's kind of why I'm going back and forth. I want to give them a legit answer, but I think I give a slight lean to Hopkins there, just thinking back to how Chicago's defense have been playing.
So would you rank them Addison, Hopkins, Flowers? Is that how you would go?
Hopkins, Addison, Flowers.
Hopkins, Addison, Flowers. There you go. Gotta have it.
Oh, that's a good point, actually. Andrew's being out. Harry Snowman, shout out to that's a very valid point. Yeah, that might bring Hopkins. I might actually go decide between Hopkins and Flowers. Again, these guys are all in the same range for me. So you're probably looking at your roster. If you have, Dobbs at quarterback and you want to stack, or maybe you're looking at your opponent's quarterback to see where, that plays strategically. But these guys are all really close for me.
And do we know the health of Beckham? Beckham was really coming on last week, and then he went down too.
He was actually.
That's another thing to consider too with this. And I this is why, like, not that I hate doing this show on Tuesdays. I love doing this show. It's just frustrating doing it on Tuesdays.
It makes it hard, right? Yeah, it makes it hard with some of those because you don't have all the information.
That's what always ticks me off about doing Fab on Wednesdays. It's like we have one injury report, and we got to base our decisions on how we're changing our roster based on one injury report. It is what it is. It's we've done it for years now. We can keep doing it. The gotta have it's in week 12. Let's go through this list, and I'm going to hop around here a little bit, JD, because we've talked about some of these players like Jaden Reed, Michael Pittman. I know we were talking about with that potential trade before. Brandon Aiyuk. I haven't looked at the stats on this. Doesn't it almost seem like we get excited when Deebo Samuel is out for the possibility of Aiyuk putting up big numbers, and then sometimes he does, and other times he's just kind of like all right. But I feel like when Samuel's out there, he's one of those guys that rises to the occasion and does bigger numbers when he's got Samuel out there, which is weird, but sometimes it happens that way.
Well, it opens up the offense, right? Sometimes we think just our instinct is, added more mouth to feeds, that saying, but that just opens up the offense a lot of times, right? It's just like your running game will open up the offense for your passing game. And I think that's what Deebo does. He is part of that running game, right? He is part of that passing game. He's a big part of that offense. That's probably the one knock against Aiyuk. He's super talented, great route runner, but he's got, other alphas in that offense, and Kittle, Deebo, CMC. You've got Seattle. They're at Seattle, so they're favored by 6.5. Over under is 62 and a half yards for Aiyuk right now, according to DraftKings. But we're also seeing Purdy bring up his level of play right now. Like he's playing, I think he had like a perfect QB rating or whatever, QBR or whatever it is. Not that I ever go by those, but this past weekend. So I think you definitely want him in the lineup. Look, he just put up 5 for 156 and a touchdown. Including a nice 76-yard TD. And that's the thing, right? Any of these guys, these studs that have that big play opportunity, they offer that ceiling. So I think if you get too fancy with a guy like Aiyuk, you miss that big week. And that's probably what happened to some people this week if they tried to get too fancy.
Yeah, and Aiyuk to me is like, more so like almost like a set it and forget it guy the rest of the season. Well, I think the next big question I have with Aiyuk is how high he goes in drafts next year, right? The Niners core comes back as it is. That's going to be something to be watching for as drafting season 2024 rolls.
Well, he was going, where was he going last year? He was going, I'm looking at a main event from September. Wow, I cannot find him right now. Oh, there he is. So he's 5th round.
This is 2023, right?
2023. He was going end of the 5th round. So you got to think he keeps going like this, he's going to definitely creep up, probably in the 3rd, 4th round, around there.
And I mean, he's going to be going ahead of Samuel for sure next year, right?
Yeah. Again, my one hesitation is Debo is one of those guys that as we get further in the season into the play, like that's where the team leans on him, right? That we see it in the playoffs. They lean heavily on Debo. So, yeah, I mean, we could see both of these guys. Maybe they're one of these teams where both of these guys are going higher than, one of them is maybe going higher than they should, or maybe even both are going higher than they should. But I think, I could easily see them kind of skipping a lot of these guys that I'm seeing on the draft board right now.
Somewhere right around where Aiyuk was going, maybe a little bit after, was former first-round pick Drake London for the Atlanta Falcons. Drake London leads one of the most compelling is the wrong word because compelling is too positive a connotation on this. One of the more interesting teams in the NFL as far as skill position players go, with Kyle Pitts, who's been a mystery wrapped in a riddle, smothered in secret sauce ever since he came into the league. Bijan Robinson, who Arthur Smith seems to use as a toy. Sometimes he wants to play with them. Most times he doesn't, and he just leaves them sit there, which has been frustrating. And then throw in the quarterback question, too, with Desmond Ridder getting benched, Taylor Heineke starting. Now Heineke gets benched, and now Ritter's back starting. So this is the Falcons were off. They were off in week 11. Week 10 was their last game against the Cardinals. And Drake London led the team in receiving with 36 receiving yards. This is not what you want to see when you are thinking about flexing out Drake London this week when you have to make the playoffs. A player that, was probably drafted as the 3rd wide receiver for most of the teams that took him this year. He comes into he's at home against the New Orleans Saints this week. Boy, I'd like to find better options here, JD. I don't even know how high this dude's ceiling is anymore.
Talking about 2023 draft boards, he was going in the 4th round, Balky. So, wide receiver 40 right now.
My God, yeah, that's bad. Mm-hmm.
So, you got to be, but he's on your roster. You're not going to drop him. You got to use him. However, I don't know that this week's the best. The Saints right now, 8th best versus the passing game when you're looking at yards per game. Targets have gone down his last 3 weeks, especially from the first 6 weeks. If you look at the last 3 weeks, he's been wide receiver 50, wide receiver 43, and wide receiver 23. So this time of year, not necessarily a guy you want to lean on or depend on. If you need a flex fill-in, he's a decent flex fill-in, I guess, again, relative to who you have, but only 4 targets against Arizona in week 10. That's not great. And you got to think they're probably going to run the ball a bit more with the Saints being as strong as they are against the pass.
You and I are of the same mind here. Drake London, very, very hard to trust. This next guy for the Commanders is also very, very tough to trust. But I'm going to try to make a case for Jahan Dotson here. Dotson is a guy who, when he's been bad, he's been real bad. I mean, how many bagels has he put up this year? Multiple, right? At least one, I know, but maybe multiple. And he's been bad in a lot of games this year. This is an offense that just when you think they won't do anything, Sam Howell throws for the better part of 400 yards. They are taking on a Dallas Cowboys team that is ready to, for lack of a better term, run them out of the gym in Dallas on Thanksgiving. Cowboys are 10.5-point favorites. The total on this is 48.5. To me, this screams, okay, Howell's going to have to throw till his arm falls off to try to keep up with the Cowboys. But at the same time, I understand how low the floor could be for Jahan Dotson. And if you're talking about trying to make your league playoffs or improve your seed, like Dom Gazzetti was, who's the number 1 seed at 9-2 right now. Don't screw that up, Dom. Hopefully we didn't screw it up for you. But when you look at Jahan Dotson, this week. Is he a guy that might just be that one rancid pepper you throw in the gumbo that ruins the whole thing and you miss your playoffs because of it? The upside is there, JD, but I don't know if you want to mess around with Dotson this week.
Yeah, he's like those typical like wide range of outcome.
Yes,
you said it, and I've got it. He gave you 2 donuts so far this year, including 4 points, 6 points, 5 points. So it's been ugly with Dotson, but then he's given you, wide receiver 7, wide receiver 9 in week 8 and 9 against Philly and New England. So he does have possible upside. You've got Dotson. So they're 11-point underdogs to Dallas. Like you said, they're going to be probably throwing. Funny thing is on DraftKings, his over-under, what do you think his over-under is for yardage?
I mean, I don't know, 41, 39?
Yeah, 31 and a half.
31 and a half. Okay.
So it's pretty low. And to me, it's not like I usually look at that stuff. I'm not a big gambler. I just like looking at it because it tells me what is Vegas thinking Dotson's going to do. So they're clearly not super high on him. Only 6 targets his last 2 games. Targets is probably the thing I'm looking at the most when it comes to the passing game, to the receiving game. And it's not like he's necessarily over targeted in the red zone, you could say so I think you're right in the sense that you could see garbage time with Howell throwing the ball. You could see Dotson getting you that, I think you said it earlier about someone like that 4 for 54 or something, that type of game. Maybe he gets you a touchdown in garbage time, but he's like a flex play at best, I think at this point. And you're probably playing him if you need a ceiling, like if you need that big ceiling play, you're not playing him for a floor play.
Harry Snowman says best ball player. Yeah, I would totally agree. Jahan Dotson at this point. And JD, You remember this too. You were drafting amongst the best that the FFPC had to offer. Remember how high Dotson was ascending up draft boards those last 2 or 3 weeks or whatever it was, to the point where he was sometimes going ahead of McLaurin. Fantasy high stakes players were so high on Jahan Dotson, and it's been frustrating this year because the Commanders will put up these big games, and a lot of times Dotson does not have any part of that outcome, which is frustrating.
Well, but let me just read this. So both those guys are going the 6th round. Okay, listen to the 6th round. Talk about a trap round. Freiermuth, Pacheco, McLaurin, Pitts, Goddard, Akers, Dotson, Lockett was a decent pick there. Sanders, Breece Hall, George Pickens, and Javonte Williams. So not too many hits in the 6th round of a main event draft. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
a lot of landmines.
Tyler Soto, the man behind the glass, he actually has a question for us tonight, and since he can cut us off at any time he likes, we are going to answer it for him right now. He had Joe Burrow as his starter this year, and obviously Burrow out for the season, which is really, really frustrating with that torn ligament in his wrist. He got Sam Howell and Matt Stafford on his team right now. How high are their ceilings this late in the fantasy season? So when you talk about ceilings for those players, I think that they're high because of what Howell's been able to do and some of the game scripts that have been presented to the Commanders this year. And obviously Logan Thomas, we haven't talked about him, but he's had more than his fair share of good tight end games with McLaurin, Dotson, Curtis Samuel, who's been out there making a few plays this year. So certainly the Commanders have a decently high ceiling and couple that with the fact that they traded their 2 best pass rushers, which should make their totals go up a little bit more in their games because they're going to have to throw to keep up. And then Stafford, well, anytime you have Kupp and Nakua, obviously your ceiling is going to be high. I think this is sort of like a matchup-based type thing. Here on out, if you have Stafford, if you have Howell, you just kind of ham and egg it with those guys going forward. I don't think either one is a great start this week, but I would lean towards Howell over Stafford in week 12, JD.
Yeah, I think you're right for this week, probably leaning Howell. And I think you're right with regards to playing, the matchup. I mean, Howell, look, QB9 on the season is pretty legit for a guy that you were getting, in the late double-digit rounds, especially in those 1 QBs. So he's averaging 19.3 points. Stafford is averaging 14 points. He's QB 21. He's had injuries. He has better weapons. So again, maybe you play matchups, but I mean, Howell's been hard to sit. Like if you have Howell or Dobbs right now, considering how you got them in the situation you're in at quarterback, I think you're pretty happy with either guy. They're both strength of schedule, looking at like week 11 to week 15, or I guess now we're week 12 to week 15. They're very similar. So I think it's probably where you feel comfortable in the matchups. But if you're looking at till now, Howell's actually outperformed Stafford.
I think sometimes we get into the trap, not necessarily a trap of searching desperately for ceilings this time of year, trying to make our playoffs, especially if we got to chase points. One of the players that I think you're not necessarily chasing points, and I think he's an all right start this week if you're trying to make the playoffs, and that's James Conner, who gets the Rams at home this week. Yes, I know Aaron Donald's still there, but quite frankly, the Rams don't have a ton of talent on that defense outside of Donald. We talked about, at the start of the NFL season that this could be a historically bad defense for the Rams. And I think they've held their own. I feel pretty good about James Conner in week 11, or actually, beg your pardon, in week 12 here at home against the Rams. How do you feel about him this week from a start-sit standpoint, JD?
Yeah, James Conner is a guy we were high on coming into the season. Unfortunately, he's dealt with injuries, and coming into this season without Kyler, this offense has been questionable at best. But surprisingly enough, this year, his highest yard per carry at 5.1 in his career. He's coming back. Kyler's back now in the offense. You got to think that opens it up for the running game. They're +1 versus the Rams. You've got kind of this rejuvenated feel with this offense. Mm-hmm. And you got to think that James Conner is going to come in and establish himself as kind of that RB1 in the offense. It's a divisional game. Clearly, Vegas thinks it's going to be a close game. I don't see a lot of scenarios, Balky, just looking at the running back position and who you can really depend on, where you're not starting James Conner as a running back. Because I know even teams where I've got, like, let's say Etienne and Gibbs or Hall ahead of him, I'm still throwing him into one of my flexes. Yeah,
I think you got to get him out there. I have him on a handful of teams. He's starting on all of my teams this week for sure. We're way up against it, so let's take a quick break here. When we come back, we'll kick off hour number 2, even though we're well into hour number 2 here. We're going to find out where JD from the GOAT District stands on players like Isiah Likely in the wake of the Mark Andrews injury. Devon Achane, what happened to him last week? What do you do with him going forward? We'll talk about Tank Dell as well. He's JD from John Daniel from the GOAT District. Check out the GOAT District anywhere you get your podcast, including the Player Profiler Network, right? As well as like your Twitter feed always has the links to all of it, right?
Yeah, so you can go to the GOAT District YouTube channel, and then tonight, every Tuesday night, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, we're on the Player Profiler Network.
There you go. Follow him on the X at JD GOAT District. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Where does JD stand on certain players? That's coming up next, right here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network.
From the Hometown Hero series, Zach Parise.
That is a very nice card, and that's one I'm probably going to have to organize a little trade ski with you, because I would actually like that card.
I mean, you got downtown Newark in the background. I mean, Newark has never looked so good.
No, it is not.
We'll put that back up on the screen. I just want to have a penny sleeve ready, and yes, we can absolutely work out a little trade ski for that, because that belongs in a Devil fans collection right there.
I'll trade you the Braden Schneider rookie card for it.
Done.
There we go. The first card-for-card trade on Rip and Riff history. And it was that easy.
It was that easy. That's because, because neither one of us are jerks. And it's the same thing when we try and do fantasy trades. Like, we don't try and screw each other. We have conversations. If there's a fit, there's a fit. If it's not, it's not. We don't try and, take the other one over the barrel. So there you go. In a penny sleeve. Hometown hero, Zach Parise. He was among the league's most productive goal scorers in 06-07 and followed up with a terrific regular season with an even more impressive postseason. And then they talk about what he did in the first round series against Tampa Bay that year. So that's off to the side for you.
That's true. And, if this is it for his career, he had a hell of a career.
He did.
Hopefully he comes back one more year with the Islanders, but if he doesn't, hell of a run.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on here on the Better Sports Network. 9 minutes past the top of the hour. I'm Eric Balkman. He's John Daniel from the GOAT District, hanging out, chopping it up until 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern time tonight. plenty of stuff to get to. In fact, we're going to find out where JD stands on certain players going forward here for the remainder of the fantasy season. Don't forget that the FFPC Weekly Challenge has arrived for Week 12 in the NFL. There is no draft. There is no salary cap. No convoluted rules. It's the same format as our FFPC Playoff Challenge, which will be launching probably in the next couple of weeks here at myffpc.com. The FFPC Weekly Challenge features 10, 30, and 100 team contests. You pick your players, you let them ride for the week. No stacking. Sorry, JD. Only one player per team. And this results are determined by the total points accumulated by each individual lineup entry. You can play in the classic format with kickers and defenses or the slim format without kickers and defenses as well. The price points start at $35. They go up from there. There's a contest for everyone. You can win up to $2,500. Don't forget that new players will get $25 off their first FFPC entry of $35 or more. Use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com. That's ALARM, alarm, at the website, myffpc.com. John Harbaugh backtracked a little bit, JD. He went from saying that Mark Andrews' injury was season-ending to now having an outside chance to return this season. Harbaugh said the Andrews injury wasn't as bad as they initially feared. Now, he's meeting with a foot specialist. I don't know if that was today or not, but you'd imagine that he is going to miss multiple weeks at a minimum and could be the rest of the regular season. Maybe he comes back for the playoffs. We don't know. We don't necessarily care about that as fantasy owners. We want to figure out if this guy is worthwhile to keep on our teams here going forward, or if that roster spot is put to better use. So, JD, number one, where do you stand on keeping Mark Andrews around? And number two, where do you stand on his expected replacement, Isiah Likely?
Yeah, that one hurt, Balky, losing Mandrews. Lamar got hurt, I believe, as well that same week. So I've got some stacks. Talk about stacks. I've got those two stacked in some FPCs, and I believe one of our mains might even have Mandrews. But it's tough anytime one of those top tight ends is out, especially in a tight end premium platform like the FFPC. I was really high on Likely coming into the season in the sense that for the price and the upside and what we saw last year, as he started getting more involved in the passing game and in that offense, he looked decent. The problem was this year, where did I see? So Nick Mencio here points out 2 games without Mark Andrews this season. So week 1, 77% route share, 1 target, 4 yards. Sorry, one target. What is that? 1.4? No, I don't know what that is. Anyways.
Well, 4.0 yards per catch.
Yes.
No, I'm just guessing.
No, because it says 1 target, no catch, so it doesn't make sense. But anyways, and then week 11, 88% route share, 2 targets. Look, basically saying that Mark Andrews missed 2 games. You would think that Likely would come in and smash. He didn't. Mm-hmm. What does that mean moving forward? I mean, that's some information that we can take. You have PFF pointing out that Likely in his next 6 matchups has 2 favorable matchups against top 5 at allowing fantasy points to the tight end and Nathan Jenke on Isiah Likely. So I think if you lost Andrews, you probably you're lucky, you have some backups you can throw in there, or you got to figure it out. And if you got to figure it out and you have waiver wire bid money, you're going after Likely this week, and that's probably your number 1 priority. And who else can you throw in off waivers? Because guys, even guys like Conklin are rostered right now.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So a couple of things there. Number 1, to your point about Likely, let's say you don't have Mark Andrews. How hard would you be going after Isiah Likely on waivers if you're just trying to collect some talent at tight end? Let's say you're all right there, you're not spectacular. Do you still go heavy on him to try to get him on your roster? Or do you kind of just keep him honest bits?
So one is go look to see if you're playing the Mark Andrews team this week, right? Or in the next couple weeks. So then you're playing defense. Otherwise, if it depends on your team. I like going tight end heavy in the FFPC. So I've got teams with Kelsey Kittle. I've got teams with Ingram. Can't think right now. Anyways, 2 or 3
or somebody like that.
Yeah, dependable, must start every week tight ends. On those teams, unless I'm playing defense, I already have depth at the position. But if you're running on fumes and you've got one tight end in a tight end premium league, go out there and get yourself a likely. Go get yourself some depth, especially now with the opportunity that's knocking at the door in that Baltimore offense. I think he's a must get.
Let's talk about his real life teammate, Keaton Mitchell. This past week. The Ravens were really winning this game from the get-go, right? Keaton Mitchell had 8 carries for 33 yards, and he had an 8-yard catch. This was 1 touch shy of his season high, but when you consider how big this performance should or could have been for Keaton Mitchell, it's a little disappointing. The Chargers, and I mentioned this earlier, will give up yardage on the ground because they don't want to give up the big play. And obviously no Bosa this week. I think he's either going to be on IR or he already is on IR. I mean, this should be a pretty good spot for Keaton Mitchell, but I don't know, man. Like from what I saw this past week, it should have been big for him and it wasn't. Where do you stand on Keaton Mitchell in week 12 against the Chargers?
I feel like this has no data to support it, but this is just my experience. Are we not 1 week early on these guys often? You know what I mean? Like you're saying it was coming into this week, you're thinking this is a smash spot for him. And then next week you're like, hey, I'm going to sit him for, I don't know, who's the Spears or something like that. And
Sure.
Then he goes off. The problem with Keaton is he has big play upside. Right now, the Chargers are 14th against the rush. They're 5th easiest against the running back receiving game. And this guy can't, he's not getting huge targets, he's getting 1 or 2, but what he makes of it is what you want in fantasy. And like we said, against Chargers right now, and Chargers are down, you got to think that, they're going to want to possess the ball, Baltimore, and no better way than with your running back. I think Mitchell's a nice, sneaky flex play. And I even have, you even have teams, I think, where the injury bugs hit you, where maybe you slide him into your RB2 spot if you're super thin at running back. I don't mind Mitchell because he has that big play upside, but he's really one of those guys that we talk about that has a very wide range. So you're hoping that he does get that big play. Otherwise, he could give you, not so good production in a very significant week.
The Isiah Pacheco bandwagon got a little bit more crowded, I feel like, after the game last night between the Chiefs and Eagles. He looked pretty good, 100+ total yards, I believe, didn't score. And I was listening to, I think it was Sigmund Bloom from Football Guys and Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros talking about Isiah Pacheco. And they said, this game against the Eagles, man, I don't know if that's really where you want to deploy him. And quite frankly, I probably started him about half my leagues and sat him about half my leagues, the leagues I had Pacheco in, obviously. And I was just kind of like, whatever on it. But, man, I look at his schedule going forward, JD. He gets the Raiders twice. He gets the Packers next week, who, outside of Austin Eckler, give up a ton of ground yardage on the ground. He gets the Buffalo Bills after the Packers game. And, yeah, I know it's the Bills' defense, but they seemingly have not been the same since Matt Milano went down with that season-ending injury about 3 or 4 weeks ago, whatever it was. And then the Patriots, which, don't seem to be like capital letter New England Patriots anymore. Isiah Pacheco seems to be, and I'm not going to call him a league winner because I don't think he will be. Whatever the next level down is, I like Pacheco could do some big-time numbers over the course of the next 5 or 6 weeks here.
What do those 3 teams have in common, Balky? They're all cold weather teams.
Yeah,
later in the year, it's getting crunch time. The wins mean more. The teams need the wins more. Possession of the ball. Old school, leaning on the run game, and that's we've seen KC this year. They don't necessarily have that one go-to guy apart from Kelsey. We see Rice, having flashes and so on. But I think you're right. I think Pacheco. He's, he definitely gets way more excited about his runs than fantasy owners. He seems to do a jig anytime he gets even if he doesn't hit the 10-yard mark, he acts like he got the first down. But if you look at his last 3 games, especially, he's played Denver, Miami, and Philly. KC right now are 14th in points per game. Pacheco is RB 23. He's 10th in rushing yards, but he's 30th in target share. So, and 30th in true yards per carry. So, He's like he does have that big play ability like Keaton Mitchell Keaton Mitchell, but he's more dependable. He's going to give you more consistency. And I think, like you said, they're going to lean on him more and more. We saw it last year in the playoffs with Pacheco, and that's when he really broke out, was towards the end of last season. I think that we're going to see a similar trend this year. Again, keeping it simple, a lot of these offenses lean more on the running game as they get into the weather. We saw it with Singletary a couple of years ago in Buffalo. I think Pacheco this year is a candidate for sure as we get into the, later into the season.
We just got to make sure we keep Jerick McKinnon on the sidelines, because that if there's one guy that could train wreck Pacheco, it's the guy who becomes the destroyer of worlds for Kansas City.
And it's out of nowhere. It's like the peekaboo. It's like, hey, I'm here, peekaboo. Like, there goes your touchdown.
Yeah. It's so frustrating. Unless you have McKinnon, and then you love life.
Dan loves McKinnon. We've won some pretty good weeks with McKinnon in the past years, but not a guy you want to lean on this year.
For now, we say that for now.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true.
Like I've seen, you've seen too much. I've seen too much. Like, nothing surprises me anymore. No, it's just, if McKinnon comes out and scores like 6 touchdowns in 4 games, I will not be surprised. Not one bit. A player who is at the same position as Jerick McKinnon is DeAndre Swift. And I think it's important. Like, obviously we want to do start sits. We want to talk about what these players mean for the season. But I think it's always important, especially when you get to November and December, when we find out who the studs of the season were. And it's clear, based on where Swift was drafted, he is a stud this season for FFPC players. I always like to look back and think, how did all these talented high-stakes players let this guy slip so much in drafts that we got these unbelievable bargains on players like Swift? JD, what do you think we missed on with DeAndre Swift? And quite frankly, how can we avoid making that same mistake when draft season comes around next year, so we don't let a running back that put up production like this fall to the 6th round or 7th round or wherever he was going?
Yeah. So again, sometimes you got to keep it simple when it comes to fantasy. And I find that is probably what most success is, when I keep it as simple as possible. And tying your running backs to good offenses is always a smart thing. Dan and I got Swift for our 9-2 main event right now in the 7th round. So just if you look at, this is at a time when JT was falling in that round, James Conner, you got David Montgomery. So some really nice running backs in that round. And especially if you build teams like we do, where you're going wide receiver heavy early, and then you can hit these guys later. That's kind of the beauty of building those teams, is when you hit on the Swifts, when you hit on the Montgomerys, on the Jaylen Warren, who's going in the next round, and you have those studs at receiver, those are the teams that, really make an impact, especially in these redraft tournaments. So I like Swift, RB12 on the season right now. He's not necessarily going to win you a week, because he's not like a ceiling guy, but he gives you like a pretty consistent, like mid-teens. He's like a solid, RB1, RB2, like back end RB1, early RB2 type of guy with what he's given us so far. And he's going to be part of that offense. It feels like he's found his groove in Philly. They found, they understand his strength, and he's found his rhythm in that offense. So I definitely like him. And I mean, Philly's 5th right now, point per game. So you got to like that if he's your running back.
Yeah, I mean, it's what are we talking about here? We're talking about the starting running back, the lead running back on one of the best offenses in the NFL. The only thing that gives you pause is the brotherly shove and Jalen Hurts, his ability to score at the goal line. I think that's one of the things that we worry about. But you're playing Swift here, a brotherly shove or not, he's just too valuable not to play. Mm-hmm. A player that was in that same conversation was Devon Achane. Devon Achane wasn't selected all that differently from where Swift went in drafts. Achane set the world on fire, got hurt. We found out that it was always probably going to be the minimum on IR, and it was. And then he came back and promptly got hurt again. Mike McDaniel talked to the media yesterday. Adam Schefter had the report that there's a chance Achane will play this week on Black Friday against the Jets, and there's a chance he won't play. Now, this is the opposite of the Justin Jefferson situation, because we don't have to wait till Monday to find out what's going on with Achane. We just got to wait till Friday. So hopefully you'll have other options here. If he is active and we find out he is playing, has the production been enough for you, JD, to roll the dice and say, okay, I'm going to trust Achane this week. I'm going to put him in my lineup. I'm going to see where he takes me. And I have a couple of Achane teams where I know I'm not playing him because I have so many other top 15, top 20 options this week. And the floor is pretty low for Achane. But for those teams out there that are deciding between him and like maybe a top 25 guy, I mean, what do you do with Achane against the Jets, which is going to be a tough matchup in a game that he might not be 100% as well?
Yeah, I mean, this one hurt. Another guy, we were high on in the district, especially when the Dalvin Cook rumors were hitting. Achane was such a smash in drafts just because he was falling. People were expecting Dalvin to go there and take over, and it's hard to sit a guy like Achane in that offense, a team that can put up 70 points. And I mean, he's won weeks. I've got teams with him, Tua, and Hill. Actually, the Scott Fishbowl, I've got those three. And I mean, I could have those guys go off and sit the rest of my team, you know, and still kind of win the week. So when you have guys that have league week winning upside like Achane does, I feel like because of what we saw last week, I don't think they play him unless they know for sure. And I mean, what does for sure really mean? But I'm just saying, like, I feel like they're going to be more cautious this time, considering he went in and got hurt right away the last game. So for me, I'm happy if I'm you right now, and I don't have to depend on him. And I do have those studs, maybe JT's back or something like that kind of moves up, and is able to fill that spot. It's really hard for me to sit Achane if I know he's playing.
All right, let me throw this at you, JD, because I know I off the top of my, and this might be more than 2 leagues, but I know at least in 2 leagues, I'll face this choice. Do I play Achane this week against the Jets, or Kyren Williams, who is expected to be back for the Rams this week? Because that's a decision I'll have to make.
I laugh because I literally wrote down as the last thing here, if you're playing in like either like a dynasty league or something, and it's like contender versus non-contender, and you're maybe the contender and you have Achane, maybe you trade Achane for Kyren Williams and a first or a pick or something like that. You know what I mean? That's fine. That's literally what I had as my last line, because I think Kyren Williams shown you that kind of upside this year. Not in that good of an offense as good as the Dolphins, but he's given you that huge ceiling. And when he's healthy and he's playing, I mean, he's like a week winner, and those are the guys you want. So I would probably Kyren Williams against an Arizona defense, not the greatest against the run. So I'd probably lean Kyren in that instance. But I mean, it's close, right? It's going to be hard for me to sit Achane if he is for sure. But I think Kyren Williams is a perfect guy that you could put in and feel confident that he can give you a similar ceiling.
Shout out to Bill Hollywood hanging out on YouTube right now. He said he'd play Keaton Mitchell over Devon Achane this week. And I think we say like, whoa, really? But at the same time, just because the dude is active doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get a full complement of snaps too, which is, I think, another thing we need to explore.
Not that far off. You've got Mostert, you've got Edwards, very kind of similar in the sense that they're not necessarily going to be the number one guy that's leaned on, but they have that big playability.
Tank Dell, speaking of rookies here, has been unbelievable this season. A guy that, I'll be honest with you, I didn't see this coming. I wish I had him in more leagues. I have him maybe one out of like 24 or whatever. It's crazy to see what he's been able to do, not only on a Houston team that is trying to make strides and grow as a team trying to find its identity and build the culture there. It's a rookie quarterback throwing to him, and he's a rookie receiver, and yet that doesn't seem to matter. You look at him this week, I would imagine that you'd be hard pressed to find 3 receivers on your team that you want to start ahead of Tank Dell. I mean, certainly it's possible, but Tank Dell at home against the Jaguars, and quite frankly, from here on out, I don't want to say he's matchup proof, but it's really, really difficult for me to find reasons to sit Tank Dell at this point in the season based on what I've seen, JD.
One thing I love is from pass catchers is targets, right? I talked about it earlier. He's had 11 targets, 14 targets, and 10 targets the last 3 games. You see how this offense is ascending. You see Stroud just getting better every game, going in and beating Cincinnati at home. I mean, this offense is legit, and clearly Tank Dell a big part of that. And being targeted in the red zone, 5 red zone targets against Cincinnati in that game that they won on the road, which was, the narrative before that game was that Stroud was not as good on the road, and he proved people wrong. I think they've got 2 stud receivers in Houston right now. I mean, you got to love if you have Tank Dell or Nico Collins on your roster, but with, 35 targets in the last 3 games, you can't ask for more than that. There's no way you're sitting this kid right now if you've got Tank Dell on your roster.
Tyler Soto, our producer tonight, said that he tweeted this out last evening. It's going to be a Chiefs and Texans AFC championship game, and the Texans are going to win. Sorry, Swifties, which would be horrible for the NFL. To have the Chiefs on the national stage to try to get to another Super Bowl and to see C.J. Stroud and who's the head coach there? Not DeMarco Murray, D'Amico Ryans. D'Amico Ryans and C.J. Stroud beat the Chiefs, and that would probably be at Arrowhead too. Man, sign me up for that. Not that I'm a Chiefs hater, but I'd love to see that happen. Just because
it'd be nice to get a different matchup, as we get later in the playoffs here.
Tim Boyle is starting at quarterback for the New York Jets against the Dolphins on Friday. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is going to make his 3rd start of the year, I believe, this week for the Cleveland Browns. He led them to a victory. Well, he was the quarterback that was on the team that beat Pittsburgh this past week. I don't know if he led them to a victory, but say what you will. I mean, he made enough plays and managed the game well enough for them to get a victory. When you look at these games this week, Boyle against the Dolphins and then DTR's Browns are on the road in Denver. You're not playing these guys unless it's a super flex league. But I think about some of the other, like the fringe guys on these teams. What does it do for Conklin? What does it do for Garrett Wilson? What does it do for Njoku, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore? How nervous are you about starting some of these pass catchers with Boyle and DTR throwing to him?
Very nervous. Undrafted 29-year-old from East Kentucky. Miami's favored by 10, but their defense has been legit. They've been pretty good. Boyle's passing yards. I looked up Boyle, on DK over-under. What do you think his over-under is on yardage?
I would say 165, maybe. I don't know.
You almost nailed it. 161.5. That's really good, man. That's really good.
Take the over.
take the over. Miami top 12 in opponent yards per completion. So this is a really tough spot for Boyle. Does it, sometimes you see this like spark with a new quarterback coming in, or I don't know, man. I feel like the players will probably be happy to have Wilson in there, but I don't know that they know what they're going to get out of Boyle. And you talked about Superflex. I mean, I might play a lot of positional players ahead of him in my Superflex spot if it's not a 2 quarterback,
Right.
If you've got like a Christian Kirk or someone like that on your bench, like a Ridley, depending on how good your roster is, I'm probably leaning the player in a lot of those cases. So I don't know how relevant Boyle's going to be. If you're desperate, you have to start him for a reason. You have Watson and Cousins or something, and you weren't able to make anything else work. Then yeah, you got to throw him in. But I'm not looking to play this guy anywhere. And look, we've all seen these out of nowhere quarterbacks come in and have, any given Sunday production. And you love to see those, but I'm not going to bank on it.
It's why we love the NFL. I always say this. It's why we love the NFL and why it's so maddening at the same time. It's a funny. What does Joe Bryant say? I think it was Joe Bryant from Football Guys always said, it's a game played with a funny shaped ball that takes weird bounces.
Yes.
Weird stuff happens.
I remember hearing that. Yep.
The last one I want to bring up here, and this is a player that I had to make a charge. I made the playoffs in the Scott Fish Bowl, but it was by the hair of my chinny chin. It was not by much. But I had to release A.T. Perry to pick up a tight end last week because I had Taysom Hill on a bye. And I really wanted to keep this guy around. But I don't know how much I'm missing out. And then Michael Thomas gets placed on IR today. So I would imagine that this is a boon for him. 56 snaps against the Minnesota Vikings in Week 10. That led the team. What I'm curious about here is, to me, this is much more valuable if this happens Week 3 or Week 4, right? When you have bye week issues. We're coming up on, after Week 14, all the buys are done. And then you're going with elite talent. And I don't know if A.T. Perry is the type of elite talent that you want to be rolling out in one of your flex spots to try to win $1 million in the FFPC main event or the Fantasy Pros Championship. Where do you stand on A.T. Perry right now, JD?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because on the one hand, you need to adjust your rosters so that they're ready for playoffs. Meaning, whether you like to add a second defense or, you definitely want to start grabbing handcuffs for some of your studs if you can off of waivers. You want to add depth in the right position. And again, the way I build my team, depth at receiver doesn't necessarily always help. Having said that, there aren't that many, great pickups off waivers these days. So if A.T. Perry's still on waivers and you've got like a dud on your bench who hasn't done anything, he's injured. I'm trying to think off the top of my head right now who that might be, but someone who just hasn't produced or has no upside. This guy has upside. I think Rashid probably is the first to benefit from the MT injury, but I mean, what is this? Week 10, against Minnesota, he had 4 targets, including 1 in the red zone. So 2 receptions for 30 and a touchdown. I mean, that's pretty good for a kid that, comes into this offense this late into the season. So he's a nice depth piece. Like you said, I don't want to depend on him, but if you have, you're able to do it on waivers and pick him up, again, maybe you're playing defense against your opponents, but I'm not going to break the bank for him, put it that way.
And the other thing to keep in mind, too, and not that Olave would go down. I don't want Olave to go down, knock on wood. But if he were, I mean, where do the Saints turn to run that offense? Is it just going to be some weird hybrid Taysom Hill and Derek Carr is like out of a job where Hill's just running the option all the time? I mean, Juwan Johnson's not a threat at tight end. Rashid Shaheed can threaten you deep. I don't know if he's a polished enough receiver to run the intermediate stuff. And then Alvin Kamara is like, he's the captain, dump off. I'll take it. 13, 14 catches a game out of the backfield. But I don't know if you can run your offense like that. I think Alvin Kamara even said you can't run your offense like that too. So you can see the path where A.T. Perry could be good this year. But again, I would try to load up my team with injury away running backs rather than A.T. Perry this time of year, at least. That will complete Where Do You Stand on tonight's show. It's going to complete our third segment of the evening. We're going to get to our fourth segment, lineup advice from JD from the GOAT District. We're going to talk about Devin Singletary. We're going to talk about Kyler Murray. We'll get into some Jake Ferguson stuff as well. Who would you play? Who would you start? What are you doing for Thanksgiving for these games? That and much more. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman. He's JD from the GOAT District. We roll on right after this.
Of the NHL games, I had a conversation with Coop A Fiasco yesterday when we were producing High Stakes, and he was talking about playing video games. And I, since he covers fantasy football, I said, "Hey, are you going to be getting the new Madden this year?" And he goes, "Yeah, I don't really play Madden. I play NHL." And that tells you, and it really does, that I do feel that the NHL game is better than Madden. I feel like Madden is overrated. The NHL game is so realistic. I don't know if you guys saw the trailer and all the new additions that they added to this game, but it really looks good. I tried finding all the games that I had of NHL, and I thought I had a lot. I only have 4 of them. And that's because I used to live with my my roommate and good friend who, got me into hockey, and we would play most of it in his house. So he has most of the games, but I do got 21.
There you go.
I got NHL 18. We got Connor McDavid up there. NHL 12, I think, was the start of the new consoles for me. But the big one, the Holy Grail of NHL games. NHL 94 for the Sega Genesis right there. Look at that. Look at that beautiful cover. Look at it. Looks like a VHS tape. That's how good this game was.
No, let me stop you right there. So people, VHS tape, if you don't know, it's this like rectangular black plastic with the magnetic tape on the inside. Tape's this big. You put it in something called a VCR. For a little while, there was something called Beta. It didn't last too long.
Look at this cartridge. I mean, they're not cartridges anymore. They're either discs or those little memory cards. But man, that thing is thick, right? And
you don't even need a cartridge or a disc anymore. You can buy the digital version.
And then you got Ron Barr on the book. I mean, he used to be always in the intro telling you about the team and what was going to be happening in the game. So NHL 94 is by far my favorite game, sports game. I love that game.
The High Stakes Fantasy Football Show rolls on here on the Better Sports Network. I'm Eric Balkman from the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the Road of his High Stakes Lowdown, and of course the Fantasy Football Players Championship. He's JD from the GOAT District. Listen to him and watch him on the GOAT District podcast on the Player Profiler Network, as well as the GOAT District YouTube channel. Want to mention this too. Fantasy Alarm All-Pro subscription is available for you right now. Get it today and unlock all the content for all sports, including the annual draft guides, one-on-one expert access in the Discord. You can sync up your leagues to analyze matchups and trends in your specific leagues as well. There's a lineup generator that's integrated with Fanjections as well. There's daily rankings, weekly rankings. The Value Vault position coaches are there too. Waiver wire ownership percentages, projection stats and tools, and much more. Build better lineups, guaranteed. Get access to everything Fantasy Alarm offers all year. Just use promo code LOCK at fantasyalarm.com/lock. Fantasyalarm.com/lock. Use promo code LOCK LOCK. JD, getting warmed up. Are the vocal cords warmed up for you? What are you going on in like an hour here? Less than an hour with the GOAT District
9:30.
Yeah, 9:30. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I'm glad that because I got another show tonight. You got another show tonight. Isn't Thanksgiving week wonderful? Everything gets jammed in prior to to Thursday, and we got to get fab in, and we got to get lineups in. It's so I'm not complaining about it, but it is a wonderful time to be alive. Let's get into some start sits. We got about 19 minutes left in the show. Actually, we got probably a little bit less than that, so we'll get through as many of these as we can. Devin Singletary or Jaylen Warren, the two starting running backs we always knew that would happen in both Houston and Pittsburgh when we're drafting Dameon Pierce and Najee Harris first. Devin Singletary is going to be at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaylen Warren goes on the road to Cincinnati. We found out a couple of weeks ago, Mike Tomlin, or at least Jaylen Warren told the media that Mike Tomlin told him he was the starting running back going forward. Quite frankly, for fantasy, we were already starting him as the starting running back. But we have seen Najee Harris's uptick in value go up, uptick in production go up a little bit here. If you could only play one of these guys, I'm assuming Pierce is going to miss this week. Again, it's Tuesday. Anything is possible. But we're assuming Pierce is out. Would you play Singletary over Warren this week, JD?
Yeah, this is a tough one, right? Because they're both coming off of good weeks. You've got the Matt Canada firing, so you don't really know where this, Warren took over the offense with Canada, on the field, calling the plays, but we don't know what that's going to look like. It's kind of like I talked about earlier with the new quarterback coming in. You don't know where they're going to gravitate. So if Pierce is out with the way that offense is rolling and Singletary's got the backfield to himself, I'm probably leaning Singletary unless we get word somehow between now and then Tomlin comes out or whatever and says that, Warren's the guy. But it's going to be hard to not have Warren in after, what he's given us. He just looks good, man. And he's got that big playability that we're talking about. So I think either one of these guys are good. The biggest difference for me is Jacksonville 4th against the run, Cincinnati 31st. So that's where, maybe you might take that into account when you're, deciding with your start sits. But right now with Pierce out, and then like you said, Harris, maybe more of a 50-50 split in Pittsburgh. Maybe you lean Singletary for this specific week.
Maybe. Although I think it's Warren for me right now. The disparity in the matchup for the defense there is so big. I think I'm leaning to, it's one of these things, and we've been talking about it, all episode. Ask me tomorrow. I might change my mind and say it's Singletary over Warren. Right now, I'm going to say Warren over Singletary, but it is razor sharp. We had some, I don't want to say breaking news. It's not really breaking news. This took place roughly, I don't know how long ago this was. Less than an hour. Estimated practice report for the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith got upgraded to limited practice this week, and this factors into our next question here. Knowing that Geno Smith is limited in practice today as an upgrade, would you rather play Tyler Lockett, who's going to be catching passes from Geno Smith this week? Tyler Lockett taking on the Niners Thursday night at home against the Niners, San Francisco. And then you have Chris Godwin is the other one in this conversation here. Chris Godwin, who is going on the road to take on the Colts. JD, which is the correct start there for Week 12?
Yeah, another tough one. These are all tough ones. They're all pretty close. I mean, Lockett right now is out targeting Godwin. Targets is usually the first thing I'm going to look at. He's given us wide receiver 8, wide receiver 12, wide receiver 6 this year when I'm referring to Lockett. But Godwin, other than a wide receiver 10 week in week 4, he hasn't given us anything better than 16 points in a week. So. And it kind of looked like Godwin tweaked something. I don't know. I was trying to look up to see if there was some kind of update, but there's uncertainty on both sides. So I'm probably going to lean Lockett just because he's been performing pretty well this year. You got to think if Geno's able to play, he plays and gives you, if obviously if Lock is playing, that'll change it. But if Geno looks like he's leaning towards playing, I'll go Lockett between the two.
I think it is Lockett for me right now. Like you mentioned the target aspect of it, and I tend to gravitate towards that as well. Like who's getting the ball, who's getting the volume,
Exactly.
and I lean towards that quite a bit. Dom Gazzetti said he'd lean towards Tyler Lockett as well. Hufanga, I forget his first name. I think this is the dude who just tore his ACL. He's out. San Francisco's defense is weakest against the wide receiver position. Bill Hollywood is also leaning towards Tyler Lockett. Gazzetti saying they're going to have to throw. Seattle will, and he's probably right. No question. Let's talk about Chris Godwin's teammate on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It is Cade Otton here catching passes this week, as he does every week from Baker Mayfield. Would you rather start him, and we'll assume FFPC tight end premium scoring here, Cade Otton, who is, again, at Indianapolis, or Pat Freiermuth? Now, Freiermuth is a guy that has not, to my knowledge, not been taken off IR, right? Or has he been taken off IR? Now I'm not sure.
I thought I had him up. Let me just pull it up. I know he's coming off injury, but I thought he had gotten in for very limited last week. Let me just pull it up here. Week 11. Yeah, he had 1 target, 1 reception for 7. Yeah.
All right. So now you have a situation where you can go with the upside with Pat Freiermuth, or you could roll with Cade Otton, who, does not have the ceiling that Freiermuth does, but at least you would like to think he's going to get more than a catch. Your thoughts?
17 targets for Otton in his last 3 games. That's all I need. I'll take Otton. For me, this is something I learned from Dan. A lot of times these guys coming back from injury, for me to trust them, I need to see it. Especially if I have a better option. Otton has been money right now at tight end, especially in tight end premium with that volume. Tight end 18 so far points per game versus Freiermuth tight end 27. And then again, we have this new offense. We don't necessarily know what it's going to look like, with Canada gone. So give me Otton between these two for me.
I think I'm going to roll with Otton as well. I like it. This isn't a perfect analogy, but like, I liken it to baseball pitchers in fantasy coming off injured list stints. Like I typically, unless they're a super duper stud, I really don't want to use them in that first start back when they come back off a rehab assignment or off an injured list. And it's kind of like the same thing, especially with a player like Freiermuth. I'm fine with him blowing up this week, but until I see it, I feel like I'm really rolling the dice, and you don't need to if Cade Otton's your other choice here. So go with Otton there as well. Okay, here's an interesting one. Now, this is a player who was hurt most of the season, Kyler Murray, who we've already seen do it. Like, he came back and he looked good doing it. He was keeping his teammates involved. He was getting rushing yards coming off the ACL. He gets the Rams at home this week. If you could play him or another guy who's at home this week against the Green Bay Packers and Jared Goff, who would it be, Goff or Kyler Murray?
This is actually, for me, this is a coin flip. You've got Goff, 7.5-point favorite. He's, again, over under 1.5 TDs, 255 yards, and 47.5 for the game. Whereas the Arizona game is at 44.5, the over under. It's a +1. So it should be a closer game against a divisional rival. Again, it's super close. If Detroit's defense was better, I would lean Kyler, but Detroit's defense has been kind of going the wrong way, which would only help Goff and increase the passing game. So it's a tough one. I think I lean slightly Goff right now, but honestly, you could flip a coin. Murray gives you that running upside. He's coming back. He's fresh. Those we've seen those LA Arizona games get pretty high scoring. So again, maybe a slight lean Goff right now, but I'd play either one of these guys and I'd feel comfortable about it.
I think they're both good starts this week. Bill Hollywood said he loves Goff, but if he had $1 million on it, it'd be Kyler Murray. It's Kyler Murray for me, and here's why. Here's what tips the scales for me. I have seen numerous teams take on the Packers this year, and the Packers are just so desperately afraid of giving up big plays. They do not want to give up big plays, and as a result, you can really rip off 5, 6, 7 yard chunks of yardage against them on the ground. Lions have 2 really good running backs in Montgomery and Gibbs, and they have a really good offensive line. This, to me, is the type of game where the final score, maybe the Lions win by 10 or 11, but it's really never in doubt. I think Montgomery's big this week. I think Gibbs is big this week. I think Goff is solid, but I think Murray, to me, has the higher upside, and I think they have similar floors. That's why I'm going to go with Murray, although I don't think you're wrong in your analysis on either one of these players. JD, I believe in that Lions rush defense, and I give very little credo to my Packers rush defense this week.
That's right. I forget you're a Packers fan. That's right.
Yeah. It's gonna ruin my Thanksgiving.
And sometimes it's just a matter about like, how do you feel about the Thursday game, right? Some people just hate putting in that starter on Thursday and then feeling it all weekend, and they just prefer,
There's that, and then there's some people that love putting in that player on Thursday, because then the national TV, I get to sit back and pound turkey and watch this. So
live every play,
live every play, exactly.
Yeah.
Brian Robinson or Courtland Sutton this week, as far as a flex position goes. That's our next one here. Brian Robinson looked all right last week, actually, and he gets the Saints this week. That game is in DC, I believe. Brian Robinson.
Just give me whoever's not playing Cleveland, Balky, for 5. At this point, allowing the least points in the league, Cleveland. For me, give me Brian Robinson.
Brian Robinson. They're at Dallas. My mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. So you say Robinson over Sutton. I think it's close. I think I'm going to agree with you, but man, Sutton's been hot.
It's super close,
too. I don't know. I'll say Robinson, and then when I do my show at 10 o'clock tonight, I'll probably say Sutton. So that's probably how it'll work out.
Right?
Two players. What I mean, we've touched on both of these guys a little bit here for our next one. Again, we'll assume FFPC tight end premium scoring. Jake Ferguson, Thanksgiving, that second game of the day, as he is at home against the Commanders, or Rashid Shaheed. Again, this game for the Saints is not going to have Michael Thomas. He's on on injured reserve right now. So Shaheed and Perry, you would like to say, Perry, we just talked about, would take bigger roles in this game. They get Atlanta this week. Do you have a feeling on this between Ferguson and Shaheed? I kind of lean towards Ferguson.
Yeah, easily Ferguson. He's giving you top 10 tight end production. It's tight end premium that we're most likely talking about, FFPC. So for me, give me Ferguson. We talked about the New Orleans receiving game. We don't know which way that'll go, as much as MT gives him a notch up. Ferguson's been money, man. Especially now Dallas is rolling. So you want either Lamb, Ferguson, or Dak, right? So I lean easily Ferguson for me here.
Final one of the evening. First of all, let me ask you this: how many Evan Engram shares do you have this season? Is it a lot?
Yeah, I have quite a bit of Engram, actually.
Okay.
I can tell you exactly. FFPC, I've got he's my third most owned tight end. So he's
wow.
Yeah.
Third most owned. Okay. Just curiously, who are the two tight ends that you own more shares of than Evan Engram this year?
One is great and one sucks. Jelani Woods and TJ Hawk.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah, I mean that's a good batting average right there, JD. I would definitely take that. Engram, Hawkinson, and Jelani Woods is my top 3 tight ends. Would you play Evan Engram this week over Derrick Henry? Again, FFPC tight end premium scoring. Engram is at Houston. And then Derrick Henry this week, the Titans are
they're playing
against
Carolina
Carolina in Nashville.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I hate going back to this, but the ceiling play would probably be Henry here, because he's given you the 20-plus point week, whereas Engram hasn't. But Ingram's been more consistently giving you like the mid-early-ish teens. So again, if this is the flex spot and you think you've won the week, you don't necessarily need that upside, play Engram. if you need to make up points or, you know, you need to beat the best team in the league or whatever, you're behind going in, then I'm probably going Henry.
I think I would probably agree with that. Although I don't know, dude, when's the last time you've been excited about Derrick Henry? It's been years for me.
Or anyone in Tennessee. That's why when you asked me the Hopkins one earlier, it was like, ugh, you know, it's painful to play those Titans this year.
It is not painful to listen to the GOAT District show, the GOAT District podcast, Player Profiler Network, GOAT District YouTube channel, which is, you are going to be going live in 35 minutes, right?
Yeah, 9:30 Eastern, Player Profiler. Yeah.
Which will be you and Dan Williamson, the overhyped sleeper himself. This is a show that you guys do each and every week during the NFL season, or are you also in that time frame during drafting season as well?
Yeah, so right now it's for the season. It's the first year that we joined the Player Profiler Network. For now, it's during the season, Tuesdays 9:30. Everything else you'll find on the GOAT District channel. We do a Thursday tailgate where we break down the Thursday game, pretty deep dive into it, and then sometimes we'll do like a weekend tailgate. I had John Daigle on a couple weeks ago for that show. So depending if we can swing a guest or fit it in, but yeah, you just follow at GOAT District on the X Machine. You'll get all the updates.
Yeah, Daigle was on like literally one day after he co-hosted this show. So he was a busy guy that week too. Tremendous guest, as you know. But listen, another tremendous guest co-host, John Daniel, aka JD at JD GOAT District on the X Machine. Thank you so much for hopping aboard with me tonight. I really appreciate it. Wish you nothing but the best as you chase those $1 million grand prizes, both in the FFPC main event and the Fantasy Pros Championship, and keep up all the great work that you've been doing with the GOAT District as well.
Appreciate you, Eric. Thanks for having me. You're a beast, dude. Doing this 2-hour show every week it's a beast, man. So props to you. You're a legend, like I said, and anytime, man, I appreciate that.
I appreciate the kind words, JD. We'll have you back on real soon. I want to thank JD. I want to thank Tyler Soto, our producer tonight. We are back on our normal time slot next week. We'll be back at 7 o'clock until 9 next Thursday. Zach Kruger from NBC Sports Edge and RotoViz will be my guest co-host leading into that Thursday night game. Just a friendly reminder, if you're looking for some weekly action, myffpc.com. Play the FFPC Weekly Challenge there. No draft, no salary cap. Just choose 10 players or 12 players prior to kickoff and just watch them ride throughout the remainder of the weekend. And you can win big money all the way up to $2,500. Enter for as little as $35. Only one player per NFL team. Keep that in mind as well. Thank you so much. I wish a happy holiday season to everybody out there. I know we're sort of kicking it off with Thanksgiving this week. JD already enjoyed his Thanksgiving up in Canada a couple of weeks ago. We're going to enjoy some great football and some great Thanksgiving times with friends and family this week. I hope you do the same. Thank you so much. The Best of the Better Sports Network is up next. We'll be back next Thursday at 7 o'clock.